Hi, everybody. Welcome. We have a great conversation for you. I get to sit down with Angie Klett, who's the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development at Nationwide, for a discussion about partnerships, about IoT, connected cars, a number of things that Nationwide is very deeply involved in. So, Angie, I'm excited to get to talk to you about this stuff and hear a little bit more.
And definitely me too. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, I want to jump right in because I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to start with a buzzword: ecosystems. We hear it thrown around so much. Um, it's really a story of partnership, and you can be at the center of it. You can be a spoke or coming off a spoke of it, I suppose. But it's something Nationwide, in particular, has been very active in doing for a while now on a number of fronts. You've got it in smart cars, IoT, lots of other things. Do you see this approach as the way the industry will evolve, or is this just sort of one of the many buzzwords that will fade away?
I definitely see this as the way the industry will evolve. I don't know. I would not question if it will evolve there. I think it's the pace of change. It's a when will it evolve there. And I think customers will determine the adoption or the pace in which the industry moves in this space. Um, at the end of the day, I think the industry has to protect that trust, and that trust has typically been defined through an intermediary or an advisor.
Hmm.
And so through ecosystems and partnerships, I think what we're trying to figure out is, can we still have that trust through a partner and protect that trust and not have a feeling of big brother with a customer? So as long as we maintain that, I think it's not a matter of if adoption will occur or the industry will evolve there, but rather a matter of when and the pace by which it does.
I agree, but I think you're right. The question I want to ask you, though, is does that differ whether you're in the center of that ecosystem? So it's Nationwide's ecosystem and you're bringing partners in, or if you're a player adding insurance into someone else's ecosystem, does that change how you think about partnering at all? And maybe what you even look for in a partner?
It doesn't really for me. In any partnership, I think it comes down to, do you have a cultural alignment? Is there mutual value? And are we putting the customer in the center of it? So whether Nationwide is the spoke in a partnership or the hub, I really feel like a profound responsibility to protect our mission. And that always comes back to the customer. And so I think if we use that as the standard, really it doesn't matter whether we're the hub or the spoke. It's truly about protecting our brand, protecting the customer experience related to that. And I'm okay to play in either spot. And I think partnerships vary greatly based on the positioning you have in the ecosystem. And since it's so new, I also think there's a lot to learn there. So it's easy to say that you have a standard to protect around the customer, your brand, the mission, and the values of each company. I think that learning into those things is what's really important about whether or not you want to be a spoke or a hub in an ecosystem.
I want to talk about that some more, but and get into the sort of learning plans and approach to learning that you and I have talked about other times that I think is a it's a great mentality to bring towards it. But you also mentioned the word customer, and so I want to dig into that first. Customer centricity, like I'm all buzzwords right now. Another thing we especially since COVID-19 hit, like everyone has been very focused on CX and customer centric and customers first. How does that influence your approach to partnerships and your thoughts about who do you partner with? How do you do it? What's the purpose of it? This sort of customer centric mindset.
For me, it's really to make sure that the partnership isn't centered around a marketing agreement or an exchange of dollars in return for some value to the company. What we're trying to do out of corporate development is much deeper than that. What we're trying to do is to understand where customers are in their normal course of business and what pain points are related to that in the insurance ecosystem, and then bringing our solutions to them in a way that is very easy and personalized, that allows them to move right through that potential pain point without any regard for thinking through that transaction anymore. So it's a deeper relationship. And I think about testing the different places that customers interact with us and really focusing in on the journey that they're going through, usually in a digital environment is what we're focused on right now,
Yeah.
and making it really simple for them to interact, and that creates, delight around our product, around our brand. And that's really what's important to us. We've mapped hundreds of journeys, and every partnership that we enter into, we put together a learning map and a customer experience plan. And our goal is to learn from that. And then the next partnership, we may test something different or know that we've learned something and implement those learnings into that next partnership. It's very much an iterative approach to this space. It's so new. I don't think it's as figured out as people like to portray that it is.
Yeah. I do appreciate the way you're framing it as like, you can't just have a blueprint and execute against it every time. But it sounds like what you're talking about is you have these sort of like ways of engaging type blueprints mentally. It's like, well, we need to learn things. And so what do we want to learn from? What do we want to test and experiment? You have the framings of exploring it, to seeing what the right answers are, rather than we do it this way. Doesn't matter what the customer wants or what our partner can or can't do or what they're trying to achieve. It sounds more flexible, but maybe structured broadly.
Yeah, it's definitely structured in a strategic way around a certain set of hypotheses and goals around how to test into those hypotheses. And you can't lose track that the customer and the partner also have to have value in that interaction. And so these learning maps and test plans have a view of what the carrier, what we need out of the relationship and the experience, what the customer is feeling and getting out of the relationship and the experience, and what the partner is. And there's a lot of dimensions to consider. There's strategic dimensions around your brand. There's financial dimensions around the number of people who are participating in this transaction. There are engagement perspectives where you can create a feeling or a sense of value through that engagement. And those are all things that we consider as we move through partnerships.
Angie, I want to dig into this a little bit more, and I think this will probably be the only thing we have time for. But you talk about learning, and so I want you to share some of that wisdom with people. But this is not, as you're saying just now, it's not about something that's just for insurance. It's not just about Nationwide's needs. Is you have other players that are, I mean, certainly with the customer, more important than anyone else in it. But you do have to pay attention to so many different needs here. What has been your experience as you built some of these partnerships across sectors? Because you do have, as a company, a lot of relationships in different places, and you fall in different spots in those relationships. Is there any words of wisdom or insights that you can share with, because it's early days for the industry, we're all learning. So anything that you've found particularly useful as you've navigated these relationships?
I do feel like having a set of non-negotiables is important. When it comes to what our brand stands for and living into our mission of protecting people, businesses, and futures, that is a non-negotiable for me. And so that's really easy to kind of say, okay, does this partnership or does this effort meet that standard? If it does, then we can proceed. And then the next thing is really to better understand what we want to get out of the partnership and the ecosystem itself. Are we trying to measure engagement with consumers? Our category in its pure nature is a low engagement category. So ecosystems is really interesting because if you enter someone else's ecosystem, you can create more engagement with a customer than you may have had otherwise. You can also create value. And if the customer perceives a value or a release of a pain point, I mentioned that earlier, that really can go a long way in their commitment to your brand. And in the category that we're in, we all know that keeping a customer, retaining a customer is really important to the economics of our overall profitability. So in one instance, I would say we went into an experiment with a partner for distribution. And through that experiment, we noticed a great deal of engagement and then a drop off. And the issue was really that they already had an insurance need met, but they had to verify it within the funnel we were working in. And so they would leave both the partner experience and our experience.
Oh,
And what we quickly realized was like, okay, that's a pain point. That's a new product, a new digital offering that we could have, a problem we could solve for the customer, which is don't leave the partner experience, don't leave our experience. Let us, fill the data, get your acceptance to share the data, and return that answer immediately. What we've seen is just a huge drive up in customer satisfaction around that experience. But also we drove calls out of our call center. So there's a benefit both for the partner, they're not calling, we're not answering, and the customer got immediate gratification. Those are the types of things that you learn by going through the customer journey, where you may end up solving a different problem than what you had originally intended to solve.
yeah. I think that really goes back to your point before about not having the fixed playbook. I mean, you can have your non-negotiables, but what you just described, I think for many of us, the navigating of that would have been, we set this up, it didn't work. Okay, sorry that, that pilot was not a success, move on to something else with someone else. And we're just not going to revisit that. Instead, you viewed it as interesting that that's not resonating the way we've set it up. Maybe we're answering the wrong question or asking the wrong question. Let's re-engage and figure that out. So you went back to what the customer's actual needs were, instead of what I think as an industry, we've just sort of said, oh, they didn't want it. This got us nowhere. Let's just move on. And so we miss the chance to do something like you're saying that has a number of benefits we would never have hit if we weren't in this more open growth kind of learning mindset.
I think you're exactly right. And so often from every partnership, whether we decided to discontinue it or not, mining those learnings and porting them into the next experience is so important.
Yeah.
And as long as you've got that set of non-negotiables about what your financial constraints are, your strategic constraints are, your cultural alignment, it allows you to operate in that space. I just think that you have to be willing to take the customer's behavior, their actual behavior, not what you presume it to be, not what they told you it would be,
Right.
but their actual behavior, and then leverage it to drive an expansion with partners. And honestly, what we found is that partners love that. The fact that we are quick to market with solutions that solve customer needs in both of our journeys, they are all day will invest with us in that.
Yeah. Well, it's a mindset shift for a lot of people, but one I hope they're willing to make, because yes, business wise, lots of upside to doing it, but it's just a nicer way to engage with the market. It's you're living in a world of possibility and opportunity.
For
Angie,
sure.
I could talk about, this, I could talk about this stuff all day with you. Thank you so much for making some time. And I hope people do take that away as sort of growth mindset, openness, learning, genuinely learning focused approach to what's really going on with the customer, who is the actual one at the center of that ecosystem, not any of the partners or players or ecosystem owners. It's sounds simple, but it's actually quite a big mind shift for a lot of us, but the benefits are clear. So thank you so much for sharing this today.
No problem. I'm really looking forward to the event, and also, watching these along the way.
Great. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks.